Um, Good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank Kim Sun-jun for inviting me to this wonderful Arts on the Center and giving me this great opportunity to talk about Ha Chong-Hyun, one of the great artists of our era, together with creator Kyung-am. Ha Chong-hyun is one of the leading painters of Danseka. He has been the subject of considerable study with extensive focus on his conjunction series. Yet, despite being the subject of 8 solo exhibitions and participating in many important group shows in Japan, there has not been ample examination of his activities in the country and his involvement with Japanese artists. In my talk today, I consider the main aspects of Hart's practices from the late 1950s to the mid-1970s, focusing on his relationship with Japan and the mutual influences that emerged between the artist and the place. Ha was born in 1935 in Sancheon, South Gyeongsang Province in the southeast of Korea. In the early 1940s, when he was an elementary school student, Ha lived with his family in Moji City, which is now the Moji district of Kita-Kyushu City in northern Kyushu in Japan for several years. He recalls that even back then, people at his elementary school told him he had a gift for painting. Following the end of the war in August 1945, he and his family returned to Korea that autumn. Ha graduated from the College of Fine Arts, Honik University in 1959. During this time, he produced paintings in the style of art and former, featuring irregular shapes painted with gray and brown paint. These works were abstract yet organic, with thick application and paint drip throughout. What is noteworthy here is his technique of smoking the paintings, because Ha would return to this technique about 50 years later. Waxy is a brown and gray painting of a distorted circle and a twisted diagonal line, but the painting is generally burnt and blackened, with some areas of paint having bubbled up from the heat. As art historian Kajiya Moon has observed, this smoking technique draws our attention to the intricate texture of the surface when seen up close, while heightening the sense of unease and uncertainty in the pictorial space when viewed from a distance. Following his participation in the Paris Biennale in 1965, Hart's style changed significantly. He began to use supports made from strips of canvas woven together like rugs. The colors, which were painted onto the canvas cloth either before or after the weaving, consisted of reds, yellows, blues, greens, blacks, and whites that recall traditional Korean Sekudon color schemes. Naissance B is a painting that evokes rich associations in its connection to textile design and crafts, as well as its reference to traditional Korean culture. The 1965 Paris Biennale, which didn't include artists from the United States, was a notable exhibition of pop art and kinetic art, featuring the group Recherche d'Art Visuel, as well as Peter Blake, Kudo Tetsumi, Robert Malabar, and Peter Stampley. Naissance B is of the same era as the pop rainbow-colored works that Ayo, a Japanese member of Fluxus, had begun creating in 1962. With the use of highly saturated colors and commercial elements such as the look of clothes and textile products, Hart's works of this period can be situated within the global development of pop art. In the late 1960s, Hart also produced vividly colored geometrical compositions in a series of paintings titled White Paper on Urban Planning. The paintings he showed for the first time in Japan are from this series. In the summer of 1968, he participated in the Contemporary Korean Painting exhibition at the National Museum of Modern Art in Tokyo. This was the first exhibition to introduce contemporary Korean art at a national museum in Japan, featuring 78 works by 20 artists. This exhibition was designed to show contemporary Korean art by avant-garde artists in the 20s and 30s and modernist painters in the 40s, with the aim of promoting deeper mutual understanding and cooperation between Japan and Korea. In this exhibition, Ha exhibited 4 paintings, all from his White Paper on Urban Planning series. Interestingly, in White Paper on Urban Planning 67, the canvas is folded like an accordion, making the picture three-dimensional. Whereas in White Paper on Urban Planning 68, which features primarily colored lines zigzagging across a white background, a set of slightly diagonal gray lines drawn from top to bottom in the center looks like the shadows of a wavy canvas. The illusion of canvas folds in this painting is less rooted in the classic Western technique of trompe-l'oeil and more reminiscent of tricky art in Japan, a much discussed use of optical illusion during the mid to late 1960s that had an early influence on the monoha artist. Such visual manipulation was pioneered by Takamatsu Jiro in his shadow paintings, which he began in 1964. The left one is Takamatsu Jiro's important painting. You see the shadow of a woman on the right, but this is a depicted shadow. So when you see this painting, and if the light is behind you, maybe your shadow could be cast on the surface of the painting. So you can't distinguish between real shadow and depicted shadow. So that's what Takamatsu wanted to pursue. And also, there is a plaster head on the upper right. It's a head of the Venus of Milo. So this is a real plaster, and the next one is a drawing for it, and the next one is only the shadow, and the left one is opening a hole with shadow. So of course, you can distinguish these things, but Takamatsu is interested in the experience of making the viewer suspend their perception of what you see. So this is one of the main characteristics of tricky art in Japan. So tricks were the focus of the 1968 exhibition Tricks and Vision, Stolen Eyes, organized by critics Ishiko Junzo and Nakahara Yusuke at Tokyo Gallery and Muramatsu Gallery. Artists who would later be referred to as monoha, such as Lee Ufan, Sekine Nobuo, Koshimizu Susumu, and Suga Kishio, also produced such tricky works in their early days. And monoha was born out of a critique of what Minemura Toshiaki called intellectualistic vision of tricky art. Perhaps it is just a coincidence that Ha, who created works that paralleled monoha, had also produced tricky artworks just prior to them. Yet it is quite possible that Ha felt the limitations of intellectualistic visual manipulation and was aiming to go in a different direction. Ha participated in 2 group exhibitions in Japan in 1970. One was a 6th Contemporary Korean Artist Exhibition or 6th Selected Young Korean Artist Exhibition held at the Tokyo Gallery in Tokyo in May. The title of this show is different depending on the document you see, so I couldn't decide which is correct, so that's why I wrote two titles. The other one was the 7th International Biennale Exhibition of Prints in Tokyo, held at the National Museum of Modern Art in Tokyo from December to January 1971. The artists who participated in the 6th artist show were Park So-bo, Kim Han, Ha Chong-Hyun, Lee Son-jo, Chong Ganja, and Shin Hak-chu. It is not known what kind of artworks are displayed at this exhibition. The print Biennale exhibition was attended by 34 artists from Japan and 134 artists from other 40 countries. From Korea, Ha Chong-hyun, Kim Cha-sop, and Lee Ufan exhibited 2 artworks each. Ha exhibited silkscreen prints. The foreign artists for this Biennale were selected by art experts from their own countries, but the names of the art experts from 10 of the 40 countries, including Korea, were not listed in the catalog, so it is unclear who selected Ha and other 2 Korean artists. Ha held his first solo exhibition in Japan at the Gin Gallery in Tokyo's Ginza district in March 1972 through Lee Ufan's introduction. Lee had moved to Japan in 1956 and began exhibiting his artworks there in 1963. In 1968, he met Sekine Nobuo and soon became a central figure in the movement that would come to be known as monoha. After the Contemporary Korean Painting exhibition in 1968, Lee became friends with Park So-bo, one of the participating artists, and began to travel frequently to Korea. Lee's writing gained recognition in Korea when they were translated in magazines such as Space and AG, and there was growing interest in the Japanese art world as well. Lee introduced Korean artists to Japan and took Japanese art professionals such as Yamamoto Takashi, the owner of Tokyo Gallery, and art critic Nakahara Yusuke on visits to Korea, sparking their interest in Korean contemporary art. According to Minemura's recollection, Lee spared no effort in introducing Korean artists to Japan, even those whose ideas differed from his own. One of the results of Lee's efforts was the exhibition Korea 5 Artists, 5 Hinsek White, held at Tokyo Gallery in May 1975. It was Yamamoto who selected the 5 artists, believing the color white to be a distinctive characteristic of Korean art. During the war, Yamamoto was stationed in Chongjin in northern Korea, where he enjoyed excavating ceramic fragments as a hobby, and he was fascinated by the work of Yanagi Soetsu and Yi Dynasty white porcelain. Nakahara states that in the 2 years between the spring of 1973 and the time of the exhibition, he traveled to Korea 3 times to visit the artist studios, and there's no doubt that Yamamoto accompanied him on these trips. The 5 artists selected were Lee Dong-yeop, So Seung-won, Park So-bo, Ho Fan, and Kwon-yeon. Ha was not included. Considering that none of the artists other than Park were featured in the 1968 Contemporary Korean Painting exhibition in which Ha had participated, one can assume that this exhibition was meant to focus on artists who had not yet been introduced to Japan. Furthermore, at the time that Nakahara and his companions began traveling to Korea, Ha was producing paintings using barbed wire. It was shortly after that he began using white paint, although Nakahara could have seen Ha's conjunction seeds in his second and third trips if the trips happened after 1974. Ha represented South Korea at the Paris Biennale in September 1971, along with Lee, Kim Krim, Kim Han, Song Bun-soo, and Shim Moon-sop. Ha, Lee, and Kim Krim formed a group called Terme Relationnel, in which Ha exhibited Untitled, an arrangement of cement pieces in different sizes. Such interaction between Ha and Lee were occurring even before Ha started exhibiting in Japan. Ha's solo exhibition at Gin Gallery featured Relation 72-9 and Relation 72-11. The former consisted of a square piece of lumber that reached from floor to ceiling, circled by a loop of thick rope laid on the floor, with both ends affixed to the walls. Installed on the other side of the same room, the latter was square timber of the same thickness, stood upright just against the wall, but not touching the floor, as it was mounted on a rope across the room. So it was suspended just above the baseboard. He recalls that Lee assisted him with creating these works. Monoha and other associated artists often created artworks that involved tying pieces of wood to walls with ropes or suspending them in the air. Yoshida Katsuro presented Cut-Off Hank in his first solo exhibition at the Tamura Gallery in Tokyo in July 1969. In this work, a beam of wood was tied at one end with a rope that hung from the ceiling and led down to a big stone on the floor. At the exhibition, August 1970, Aspects of New Japanese Art, held at the National Museum of Modern Art Tokyo in August 1970, Lee Ufan exhibited Relatum 3, a place within a certain situation, in which he tied several pieces of timber to an interior pillar so that they were raised off the floor. In both cases, the combination of different things foregrounded their respective qualities, while also drawing attention to the sites in which they were placed. Also associated with the Mono-ha movement was Honda Shingo, who looped a rope across a large tree trunk lying on its side and tied it to the walls in his solo exhibition at the Tamura Gallery in January 1970. Unlike Ha, Yoshida, and Lee, who used square-cut timber, Honda's massive section of wood retained the natural appearance of a log and was cut in half lengthwise in the center. Honda's work evokes the materiality of giant trees while also generating a form of visual trickery by contrasting the natural surface of the tree and the artificial cutting. Among the work of these three artists, Ha's suspended timber and Lee's installation are closest in execution, both consisting of lumber floating above the floor. Ha's title, Relation, also suggests a connection with Lee's Relatum. However, Ha's work differs from Lee's and the others in that it contrasts space and plane, looseness and tension, creating a unique expression from the multi-layered juxtaposition of different things. After his solo exhibition in Japan, Ha returned to Korea and wrote an article titled "A Look at the Japanese Art World" for the newspaper Honde Habo, published by Honyaku University, where he worked as an assistant professor at the time. According to the article, Ha saw the development of post-war Japanese art figurative art exhibition at the National Museum of Modern Art in Tokyo. It was the first exhibition that looked back on the history of post-war Japanese art at the National Museum. Together with the development of post-war Japanese art, abstract and non-figurative exhibition held next year, this exhibition provided an opportunity for artists, critics, and other visitors to think about the past history of post-war Japanese art. In this article, Ha writes that not just a collection of past history, but an effort to quietly look back on the past and seek the direction of the future in order to respond to the turbulent currents of world art today. And he saw in it the collapse of the modern concept of art for art's sake. In this article, Ha also mentions that art galleries are very active in Japan. He reports that there are over 270 galleries in Tokyo alone. While visiting many art galleries, Ha became interested in Tamura Gallery. Tamura Gallery, which opened in February 1969, hosted many experimental exhibitions by young artists, including Mono-ha artists. And when Ha visited, he saw a work of Nagamatsu Yuzo, which consisted of two gas burners producing flames on iron plates that covered the floor. Ha writes that the gallery owner, Yamagishi Nobuo, showed him photographs of more than 200 works that had been exhibited there and explained them one by one. In the years prior to Ha's solo exhibition at Gin Gallery, Tamura Gallery had held solo exhibitions by Mono-ha artists and others associated with the movement, such as Lee, Yoshida, Honda, Sugaki Shio, Koshimizu Susumu, Haraguchi Noriyuki, Enokura Koji, Takayama Noboru, Habu Makoto. So one can assume that Ha saw photographs of their works as well. However, while Ha was often inspired by their works, he definitely created his own original expression. In his article, Ha describes how he was impressed by Sekine Nobuo's phase of nothingness, which he saw at the Hakone Open Air Museum. Phase of nothingness featured a natural stone on top of a mirrored stainless steel pillar, and a large version was created for the Venice Biennale the following year. This work is tricky in that the stone appears to be floating in the air, but at the same time it is one of the representative works of the early monoha movement in that it presents the presence of stone itself. In later years, Ha held exhibitions at Kamakura Gallery, and he remembers that each time the owner, Nakamura Michiko, would let him stay at her house, where he and Sekine would engage in a wide range of discussions. One of the works that Ha created during this period is Relation 70-1, which is reminiscent of Suga Kishio's belt of interstitial condition. Belt of interstitial condition was included in Suga's solo exhibition, Condition of a Critical Boundary, held at Tamura Gallery in January 1972. It consists of an approximately 1 meter long branch placed on its side. The parts that curve upward at each end are connected by a span of 8 wires of different thicknesses and a turnbuckle. Even by the standards of Monoha's investigation of existence and the structure of things, Suga thought deeply about the relationships between one thing and another. By stretching a wire between two pieces of wood, the curved state of the wood emerges. By contrast, Hart's relation 70-1 features a single rope stretched inside a horizontal wooden frame. Both ends are fastened with metal fittings, and 3-strand rope has 2 broken strands, leaving it barely attached by 1 thin strand. While Suga's work highlights the qualities of the wood rather than the wire, Hart's work draws attention to the tension of the rope, which is similar to the tightly stretched rope used in his earlier piece, Relation 70-11. In 1971, immediately after participating in the second Paris Biennale, Ha produced Counterface, work 71-11, which he presented at the second Asia exhibition. This work consists of 2 stacks of printed and unprinted paper. Guggenheim curator Kyung-An, in her essay, interprets this as an implicit commentary on the authoritarian regime of Park Chung-hee, while also evoking fast-paced cycles of industrial and information production, consumption, and waste. In this sense, one could compare Hart's counterface with paper, the stacks of straw paper sheets that Habu Makoto exhibited at the legendary outdoor exhibition Space Totsuka 70, held in Yokohama in 1970. 6 months later, in August in 1971, Habu also exhibited this piece in his solo show at the Tamura Gallery, although this time Habu laid down the stacks of paper sheets on the floor and fitted them from wall to wall. Whereas Habu's work has minimal poetical subtext and is more about foregrounding the materiality of paper, Ha's work goes beyond emphasizing the materiality of paper and conjures multiple associations, such as media and information, conception of time, and the political situation in South Korea. From 1969 to 1974, Ha was the leader of AG, Avant-Garde, a group of artists and critics, and he created paintings and sculptures using a variety of materials with the aim of creating a new art. Between 1972 and 1973, he produced paintings using barbed wire, some of which were made with hemp cloth. He recounts that barbed wire and hemp cloth were easy to get in South Korea at the time, and that they signified imprisonment and military bases. As John Key points out, the barbed wire clearly sends the message, "Don't cross, don't enter," and denies the viewer immersion in the pictorial space. While Ha's painting incorporate everyday materials into their surface, at the same time they hint at the political situation in Korea and even question the viewing experience generated by traditional paintings, resulting in multiple layers of meaning and effect. In 1974, Ha began what would become known as the Conjunction series. Conjunction, originally titled Work 74A, consists of long, thin pieces of wood wrapped in brown wrapping paper and placed against a wooden board covered with white oil paint. Bands of white paint protrude from between the strips of wood, and the wrapping paper had turned a darker shade of brown where the oil has seeped into it. Later, Ha started pressing paint onto the back of woven fabric, allowing it to squeeze through the mesh to the front, a technique that became the signature feature of his Conjunction series. From the late 1970s, he began to use brown paints close to the color of the linen support, and from the mid-1980s, he started using a very dark blue as well as grass green, dull yellow, and gray paints. In the 1970s, Ha often drew lines, dots, and rectangles on the surface of his paintings while pushing paint from the back. But in the early 1980s, he worked more frequently on monochrome paintings with an all-over structure. The Conjunction series has been compared to the old wattle and daub technique used in traditional house building, made by applying clay or mud to a woven frame of sticks, and the Korean pechepo technique, in which color is applied from the back of Buddhist paintings on silk, but it has also served as a critical approach to traditional painting. As Kajiya aptly states, Ha uses paint to draw attention to the support itself rather than creating a painterly illusion that distracts from the surface of the painting. Nakahara Yusuke, understanding conjunction as the combination of paint and fingers, finds a critique of visuality in Ha's paintings. Minemura states that the conjunction series, which remakes paintings from their basic elements, is a critique of painting using painterly means. Having produced experimental sculptures and installations from the late 1960s to the early 1970s, Ha's production of the conjunction series in 1974 can be understood as being in line with the return to painting that began in the mid-1970s. This was not a retreat into traditional painting, but rather a fundamental practice of returning to the basics of painting to reconstruct it from scratch. And what made this endeavor possible was the experimentation he undertook in the years before and after 1970. Minemura states that Ha's conjunction paintings would not have been born without the experiences he had during the Monoha era. This is because Monoha is a movement that forces people to take a step back and consider art in terms of its nascent state. Ha exhibited his conjunction series in Japan, starting with his solo exhibition at Muramatsu Gallery in Tokyo in 1979. He subsequently held 5 solo exhibitions at Kamakura Gallery in Tokyo between 1985 and 2001, one at Gallery Bijutsu Sekai in 2002, and one at Blam in 2023. From 1980 onward, Ha participated in many group exhibitions, including the Contemporary Asian Art Show at Fukuoka Art Museum in 1980, Korea Contemporary Art Exhibition at the National Museum of Art in Osaka, and others in 1983, exhibition of commissioned works on Hiroshima at Hiroshima City Museum of Contemporary Art in 1989, and Realism in Monochrome, Korean abstract painting at Tokyo Opera City Art Gallery in 2017. It is through these exhibitions that Ha became known in Japan as one of the great artists, not only Korea, but also throughout the world. For decades, Ha has engaged in a variety of experimentation, focusing on the basic materials of painting, oil paint and woven fabric support. Since painting has been the main focus of Ha's artistic practices, his sculptures and installations from the late 1960s and early 1970s might seem like an anomaly. Yet it was precisely because of those experimental years that he was able to develop such an extensive inquiry into rethinking the fundamentals of painting. Without doubt, Ha's experiences in Japan during that time, and especially his close connection with Monoha, were of great significance to the development of his art, his work. Thank you very much.